much credit for that. And then Mouse Sports is struggles on land, but I mean they're a decent team. So I mean I'm saying it's weird, like because iBuyPower, as long as they don't just slump or just like forget everything, like they should make it out of this group. This should be their bracket play that they finally succeed in. And if it's not, I mean, if they don't make it out of group play here, I think I just got to give up on them completely forever. I think I just got to throw
Yeah, that's when
any of
I Buy
my
Power blows up like Titan did. Just
that I don't even know if they do that, but that's when like I look at all this potential they have and all this like all these times I've talked them up based off of their potential and their success they've had in North America, and I'm just like fuck it, I'm done with these guys. Just throw them in the trash can.
all right, there you go. So basically, we've talked about SIVA Land, what it meant to NACS Go. We've talked about what we think about Face It. We talked about what we think about ESWC groups. That's kind of where we're at now. At this point, I'll answer a few questions from chat, and then I'm going to cut the stream off. Reason being is we're going to have another episode of The Hype with me and Moses that takes place after um, Face It and after ESWC, and we'll kind of analyze those two events, like, from a post-event perspective on how it went and things like that, kind of like what we did with SIVA Land in this episode. And then we are going to preview DreamHack Winter and ESCA Land based on what happened at ESWC and Face It and everything else we've talked about. So it's like a two-part series we're doing with these episodes here. But there was a couple of questions from the ESCA forums thread I wanted to actually ask you while we wait for chat questions, actually.
Okay.
One of the questions is do we think there's any NA teams in the future that will actually be contenders offline versus the likes of iBuyPower and Cloud9? And we've kind of touched on this briefly on how we don't think it's netcode guides yet, how we don't think it's denial yet. So is there one? I feel like Elevate's maybe the closest I can come up with, but I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I think Elevate could beat iBuyPower. I'm not sure if they could beat Cloud9, but I think Elevate's, especially this coming ESCA land, you look at Elevate, Denial both going, and Elevate out of the two of those teams is the only one that has a chance of beating either of those teams. And I mean, we're gonna have to really see it. It's a lot of it's gonna depend on how
Yeah,
if Desi can perform like he did at the
right.
previous LAN, and if Rush can perform like he does online as well. But that team has a good mix of like young fragging talent and just some old school experience.
You know what? No, I'm going back to netcode guys. I think eventually they can take a map off iBuyPower. They are building up to winning a map against iBuyPower. Okay,
All
it's
right,
coming.
well, you can shit in
They
one
were
hand and fish in the other. Let me know what fills up
I'm
first.
just saying they were 3 rounds away from cash on Sivo Land in comparison to getting blown out in the past. So I'm gonna say it can eventually happen.
All right, I remember
But
you said that though.
but I think that it's more likely that a team like Elevate would do it first. But
Okay.
I think the bigger answer to the question is it depends on, because the question was, do you think NA teams in the future? It depends on how far in the future you're talking. Because I think near future, no. Down the line a ways, yes, possibly. I think eventually it has to happen. Just like it happened to Nip. Like Nip couldn't remain dominant forever in the European scene. Other teams finally did catch up and beat them. And so I think that it's inevitable that eventually other NA teams will have a chance. But I just think that the philosophy and the culture of NACS doesn't facilitate it as well as European CS does for another team to run up and take out an elite team.
Okay.
Which leads to the next question that we had from the SEF forums thread, which was a really good question actually from Nitro. Not the Nitro from Area 51, but the Nitro that plays for mostly Harmless in the ESCA main playoffs. I think we casted them together, if I'm not mistaken. Or
Yeah,
maybe it
I think
was
so
with
too.
Sadicus. I don't know. Anyway, basically his question was, which is a good question, is that a lot of criticism about NACS that has come from like pro player interviews and stuff like that has tried to talk about just the philosophy that takes place like when it comes to scrims and practice in NA. So a lot of teams always talk about how the way NA teams play is almost like they just try to brute force people and just out aim people. And then when it comes to scrims, like it seems like people are just playing really random and scrimming and not really actually focusing on developing better play. It's almost like they care more about winning the scrim than they care about trying out new things and finding new things that work and understand that a loss in the scrim is not that big of a deal. They let like losses in scrims tilt them too much, and it also sometimes comes down to a situation where maybe there's more of an emphasis on stats in NA, and that's another part of the reason why they focus more on winning scrims and stuff like that. So I guess the point is do you notice this problem? Would you add to it on what else you see the problem is, and what's the solution to this problem?
I mean, there's no widespread solution. You're always going to have that focus on scrim stats too much and scrim wins and take them to heart too much when they lose and um, let it get to their head when they win. Um, and it's just never going to change. The only difference is, back when North American Counter-Strike had more than two teams that could compete internationally, you had those teams were the ones who were doing it right, and it just all depends on the team. And it's you look at iBuyPower and Cloud9, and they're the only two teams who truly just don't give a shit about scrims,
Mm-hmm.
and they just play the things they practice and they try things out. And Cloud9 even does it in online matches. And um, I mean, you just have to have some one of these teams that's trying to make it big. Like all five of them just have to buy in. Like guys, like everyone just stop worrying about scrims. We're gonna try some stuff. We're gonna lose some scrims.
Mm-hmm.
I was in scrims in United Five in 2003 where we ran the same strat for an entire night for like 4 or 5 scrims, and that's the only strat we ran. We just wanted to get experience with everything that could possibly go wrong in that strat to go wrong, and then tweak it a little bit where we needed to. And teams outside of Cloud9 and iBuyPower don't do that. So I mean that's what's going to happen.
So, I don't 100% know if other teams, like, I don't know if it's just only those two teams actually treat practice properly. Maybe there are more invite teams that do just still don't do it effectively enough. But here is my ultimate solution to fix NA Counter Strike. Are you ready? I'm about to just hammer away.
Oh
So,
God.
number one is this culture about scrimming in practice that Moses says will never change, which is probably true, does need to change, even though it never will. It does need to. So, and I don't know how you go about doing that. I don't know how you go about making a
Well, then you don't have a solution.
yeah. Well, no, hold on. So you don't have like a region wide way of converting everyone's mentality over. But I will say there are some things that we can definitely do to make NACS better. Although I think that that culture problem that we discussed is probably the biggest issue and probably the hardest one to solve. But there are some other things that we can do to fix an ACS, and I think that the biggest thing that we can do is move away from this single map focused best of one map of the week system. It's terrible. No other CS does that like across the world. It's just not a good way to make NA teams on par internationally speaking against teams that don't do that. They focus on best of threes more often than not. They don't just hammer away at one map forever and forget about all the rest for weeks on end until it's that map of the week. It's just not a really good system of how you stay on form on the maps in general rather than just focusing on a single map. So I think we need more best of threes and we need less best of ones, and we need people to practice best of threes. We need people to play best of threes on officials, and best of ones just need to kind of phase out except for their proper place, which is group play in a tournament, not practice and not for big matches when playoffs and stuff like that are on the line or what have you. So that's what I would say. We need to get to this culture of best of threes over best of ones and not focusing on one map forever. On top of that, we had to come up with some type of system in NA that incentivizes playing the game year round. I mean, Moses, come on, like tell me, like how often do you see teams in Invite when you played just not even touch the game as a team once they got eliminated from ESCA land contention?
A lot. That happens every season. But I mean,
Happen, yeah,
things like that aren't going, or I mean, are gonna. I mean, the teams that are relevant don't do that because the teams that are relevant, the top 4 or 5 teams in Invite, um, they have all these other online qualifiers. They have CEVO, they have the CEVO playoffs, they have the ESCA and ESCA playoffs. Now they have Face It. Now they have DreamHack qualifiers, and they have ESWC at a
yeah.
certain time of the year, and ETS that teams are going to want to go to. So, I mean, you only really see that with like the kind of the bottom end of the Invite invite league, but
Right,
the top five or six
but if
teams.
we want to raise those teams up higher, then there needs to be more of an incentive to play the game continuously, which basically means there needs to be more competition in between like seasons of ESCA and CEVO. And the problem is that as it stands, the CEVO and ESCA seasons match up almost not quite, but almost exactly the same, to where like the off season for CEVO and ESCA is almost at the exact same time. Like right now, for instance, they're both off
I
season.
mean, listen, you can give some of these teams every incentive, like you can give them every opportunity to improve, and some of them just don't do it. I mean, some of it's just
But it
you can't cater to these teams that don't want to practice. If they're not practicing, then fuck them.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem is like obviously a lot of NA teams are like the four NA teams that are practicing uh, for ESCA LAN are playing, right? But here's the problem, right? So obviously, like Cloud9 and iBuyPower is never going to scrim against each other to prepare for events, right? That's just never going to happen, it seems. And so realistically, the only teams that they can practice against that's worthwhile are the other two invite teams that are going to ESCA LAN, and that's the only teams that they get to really practice against, to be honest, because a lot of the other invite teams are either about to die, making roster changes, don't care because they're not going to ESCA LAN. Like, I honestly think that the only team that's not going to ESCA LAN that probably still plays on a regular basis is probably Netcode Guides. I mean, the other 4 or 5 teams probably aren't really playing that much, except for
Yeah.
maybe like 10 mans or casually. So that's a problem. Like, that needs to be fixed, which could be fixed by more competition.
I mean, you want to talk about teams that you should feel bad about it. It's going to be Elevate because iBuyPower and Cloud9 are about to go overseas and play
Yeah.
in like 3 tournaments, and they're getting their, quote unquote practice there. I mean, they're gonna come into
Mm-hmm.
ESCA with like a month of playing the best teams in the world, and Elevate's sitting back here with no iBuyPower, no Cloud9 to play, with basically just denial and netcode guides to just play over and over and over and
Yeah,
over and over.
exactly. What a joke,
But
right? So it's
yeah,
just
but
like,
you can't really do anything about it if the teams don't want to practice. Like, what are you gonna do? There's
yeah.
nothing that there's nothing that say
But
like
there's a way
ESCA
you
can do
can make
that.
them want to practice, which is giving them something to compete for outside of an ESCA land slot or a CEVO land slot. Once they've been eliminated from that, and here, like you even mentioned, like recently in NACS, we have had some other things for people to compete for, like DreamHack winter qualifications, like Face It qualifications. We didn't have that 6 months ago. So, I mean, it already has gotten better because we already have had more stuff be added to the scene, but we need more stuff like that. That or it would be really cool to see ESCA and CEVO maybe off like center their league play a little bit, their schedules that way that it's continuously running instead of
You're
pausing
living
at the
you're,
same
you're
time.
living in a dream
A
here,
dream
Dust.
world that NACS gets better. That's my solution.
All
Okay,
right.
so I'm not
Let me
saying it's
let me
gonna
know when you want to
happen,
come
but
back to reality on this one.
well, the reality is that more competition fuels better competition.
Okay. Yeah, you're right.
And we are starting to see us get more competition. Like for a while, we didn't even have CEVO. Now at least we have that, and they're building up. And they're doing pretty well. I mean, they have season 6 starting up, $15,000 prize pool, so they're steadily increasing their incentive for people to compete in CEVO and stuff like that. So props to them. ESCA is obviously still going strong. We finally do have things like Face It and stuff like that, kind of stepping into the NA scene and trying to add more competition. But we need even more of that. And I
Yeah.
think that
Well,
that will cause teams to practice more because there's more to play for.
I mean, it's not so much the amount; it's the quality. The amount doesn't matter. It's the quality of it. And right now we have 5 or 6 teams in North America who, in the invite division, at least probably just 5. We'll leave it at that practice regularly and are
Hmm.
good, strong practice partners. And then you've got a team like Savage or Pure from Premier and Stream Team who both play
Yeah, I'm sure the
maybe
four
not nearly
premier
as much, but
playoff teams do
frequently.
practice a lot as well.
Right.
Yes, at
But
least I would think so.
yeah, but I
Maybe not
mean,
the stream team as much, since some of their guys like work night shifts and can't practice. But I mean, I'm sure that. I mean, I know for a fact Pure probably practices a lot, and I would assume Justice Pro does too, but I don't know for sure. So I mean, yeah, it's like your premier playoff teams and invite playoff teams, and that's it. And that's just not enough to have good practice and steady practice for the top teams to keep getting better. So that's where I'm at.
okay,
But the culture thing's probably never going to change, and if it
nope.
does, but what could change it is if the league started enforcing different things like best of threes. That probably would force teams to stop focusing on one map a week and start focusing on having better practice
I mean, I
if you
don't
want
think
to
that's
do well.
I don't think that's nearly as big of an issue as you seem to think it is, but
So what's your
it
solution
would
to the
certainly
problem
help.
then?
There's not a solution. I mean, there's not a solution. There's nothing that can be implemented outside of individual teams deciding to practice differently. That's the solution. And we just don't have that. And I mean, that's going to be when teams decide they want to take things more seriously and more professionally, then they'll change. But I mean, why do these? I mean, a lot of these teams, especially in the lower tiers of invite, just want to come on and have some fun. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, except for that it's the invite division. All the teams that have something to play for, that have sponsors that can send them to events, they they practice and play pretty adequately and pretty well. I think most of this is occurring in like the lower tier of invite and maybe the premier division, but um, I mean the top five teams in invite practice with each other pretty seriously and pretty well as individuals and as individual teams.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know though. I think that's not enough though. You can't just have 5 active teams practicing against each other in the professional or semi-professional scene of NA and expect it to get any better. Which is people work based on incentives, man. And if there's an incentive to play for, people will play more. I mean, that's just my thought. I don't know. I
I
think it
mean,
could. I think
why? There's tons of incentive for these teams to get better. We've given them free travel to ESCA whenever there's an ESCA LAN. Uh, you get, I
But
mean, you get the chance to win $20,000. How much more incentive do you want? You get these online qualifications to let you go to Europe.
no, here's my point though. What incentive does Area 51 or SapphireClone.com or Reliable have to be practicing hard right in this moment when there's literally nothing going on for them for probably at least another couple of months? Because there's no CEVO going on right now, so they don't have that to play for. They're eliminated from EACA, so they don't have that to play for. I mean, why are these guys? What incentive do they have to play? There's nothing to play for. There's until EACA next
Their
season.
motivation is next season. Like
That's a
this is
long ways away, though. So that means they're going to go on a break for a little while, like a month, and then they'll probably start practicing again, like at the end of December or January when the next season's about to start. But that doesn't help out the teams that are trying to practice right now because they do have something to play for with ESCA land and whatnot. You see what I'm saying
listen,
now?
listen,
Like
if improving just to be better for next season isn't enough, then you shouldn't be an invite. I mean,
that's
that's just how it
fair,
is.
but but I'm speaking of the reality of what's actually happening, which is
Well,
hurting the
I
teams
am
that want
too.
practice.
I understand, but you can't do anything to change how the other teams want to practice. I mean,
If there was an
if
all-season tournament that had a little bit of prize money or something, that would
there are
incentivize these
off-season
Boston teams.
tournaments.
Well,
There
yeah,
are
now
off-season
we're
tournaments.
just starting to get them. Is my point. Like the John Wick thing we're about to get from Face It, the DreamHack Winter qualifications. I mean, things like that. Yes, did incentivize
I
some of
mean,
these other teams to play.
RGN has one coming up that's for like 2K. I mean, there are. They just don't care, and whatever, that's fine. I mean, listen, things would be different if I was running Invite. I would have a very different view of Invite. But um, the way it is right now, there's not really anything you can do. And I think that we have enough to provide these teams incentive. They just uh, choose not to practice for it. So whatever.
Yeah, I mean,
If your solution is to give them something to play for, they have things to play for. I mean, just because it's not happening right now doesn't mean there's not something to play for. They play because they're a team and they want to get better for a month down the road
well,
when there's an event or a month down the road when the season starts up.
right.
If they're not using this time properly, then that's their problem and it's
Well,
going to show come next season, just like it showed this season.
let me focus my point a little bit differently than that I'm trying to make. And the point is that yes, as like some of these teams that I've mentioned do have the incentive to try to just get better because they want to get better, or just because they want to be better in the game, or for next season. Right? I get that, but what I'm saying is if you're a team that has just come off of playing every night, 4 nights a week for several months to try to qualify for a land that you don't qualify for, tendency is that team's going to take a break for a little while before they start practicing again. But the reality is that break's probably going to last longer if there's nothing going on for a while. So, I mean, yeah, most teams do take a break for like a week after a big LAN or something like that if they can afford to do so. But for some of these lower tier invite teams, I mean, the next season of ESCA isn't going to be until probably January or something like that, right? So with that said, I mean, that team, yeah, they may want to practice for next season, but they're probably going to take a break for a few weeks before they do so. And during that few weeks of time, that's teams that are no longer on the table for the teams that do have something that they're trying to practice for right in this moment to be able to have teams to play against. You see my point? So it's not like these teams will never play or practice again, because they will, but they're going to take a break for a while, which takes teams off the table to practice against. And then, like you just said, I mean, iBuyPower and Cloud9 are gone. That's elevates, and some of these other teams, like big competition they can practice against, and they're gone. So that's like 3 weeks of thrown out the window of not really being able to have a whole lot to practice with. So I don't know. My point is that I constantly hear every interview that I do from every pro player that I interview, that they'll just sit in the server for hours and never find anybody to play against. So my question is how do we fix that? I'm just trying to offer like a suggestion. I don't know if it'll work or not, but I mean, you're saying there is no way to fix it, is your point? Like, is that what you're getting at?
I mean, you're right. You add some of these events, but these off-season events, but I mean, we saw even during the ESCA season, some of these teams weren't practicing. So there's teams in Premier that invite teams will play against because they know they practice and they know they play and they know they're going to be organized and they're going to play seriously. And there's teams in Invite that you will actually play Premier teams over because you know this team in Invite is just going to get together and run around and do some stupid stuff. And I mean, adding events isn't going to change that because we have a lot of events for these people and they still don't take those seriously. So it's whatever. I mean, there are just teams you play against and teams you don't. And yeah, it sucks for teams like Elevate and and such when the Cloud9 and Ivan Power, the two best teams, are gone. But uh, you have to be good at practicing as a team, going over things as a team. And maybe you don't get a scrim one night. Maybe you go over a couple of things and you get to practice against a main team and you get to just have 10 crazy experimental ideas that you want to try. And I mean, you just have to learn how to practice in that environment, and it puts North American teams at a disadvantage, certainly. But what are you going to do to change it? You can't. It just all depends on teams changing the way they want to they want to look at playing the game.
Right, and so I was just trying to find a way that incentivizes them to make
Yeah,
that
there's
change.
there's just not one. They have enough incentive. If nothing's changed by now, then whatever. You have teams who are motivated by those incentives, and you have teams that aren't. So whatever.
So it's just a bleak picture from here on out. There's no
I don't.
redemption.
No, I don't think it's bleak. It's
Right.
just
I get what you're
there
saying.
there are teams that just one thing I think ESCA could do that I think would be a lot better is if they added like relegation matches for the two or three top premier teams and the two or three lowest invite teams. That would give you something to play for.
True.
You want to stay in invite, you got to practice.
Yeah. That I mean that's another incentive. Yeah. Besides like more added tournaments, just different rule sets to keep what you do have. Yeah, I could see that. Um. So yeah, that's definitely one thing. I think that's a good point. But we actually didn't really get any questions in chat. The only other question I had was somebody asked, "How do we feel about Steel wanting to opt over Skadoodle?"
I think it's
Obviously,
dumb.
that's yeah. I mean, and it's never gonna happen. So there's not a
It's
whole
a
lot of
pretty simple
discussion to
one.
be had on that topic. Um, Somebody asked, "What if Valve put in like a 5v5 ladder thing?" I don't think that would
Cool.
help the top teams at
ESCA is
all.
still going to be around though.
Yeah, it's not gonna make a difference. Team matchmaking would be fun for like more amateur level players, but it wouldn't help raise the skill ceiling of like the top and mid tier. I don't think. Um, I don't know. Other than that, I mean, we've already been talking on for a while. We've done a lot. We've talked about CEVO, talked about Face, talked about ESWC. We're doing another episode where we talk about Face and ESWC again from a post-event perspective, and then we're going to preview ESCA Land DreamHack winner. Or yeah, so that's where we're at. I mean, any final thoughts, most before we turn this thing off? Like I said, it's lasted a long while. It's been like over 2 hours, so
Yeah, no, I'm all good.
it was fun. But I think we're actually gonna sign out now, unless we get any more questions here. But it looks like stuff's kind of just dying out. Some people ask, do we think Valve will ever host their own league like LCS does? No, I think
No.
they'll just stick to the major tournament format that they're already on. It'd be cool to see them like. So is it 4 majors a year is where we're at, based on this last year? DreamHack winner will be the
Yeah,
fourth of the
four
year.
majors.
So what if you did like three $250,000 tournaments and the last one of the year was like $1 million or something like that? That'd be cool.
Yeah, that would
So
be.
I mean, it'd just be cool to have like a major capstone event at the end of the year that's like a little bit higher prestige than like the previous ones. However, with that said, I would hate if like we went to the international with CS:GO, we only had like one big $10 million tournament a year. I would hate that. I would rather just see us have 4 small majors than one giant international event with millions of dollars on the line. I'd rather it be spread out because it just it keeps the game relevant throughout the year. I mean, God, how many people actually watch Dota 2 heavily outside of the international?
You'd be surprised,
I
actually.
would be, but I guarantee you the numbers are so far apart between how many people watch the international, how many people watch the other events.
Yeah, they are.
So, and I think that for every CS major event, you have a pretty equal amount of viewers now. Like all like the high tier tournaments, typically for bracket play through finals, you're getting like 50 to 60,000 viewers concurrent. And then for like the $250,000 tournaments, you're probably hitting like right at 6 figures concurrent. Whereas the international viewership has to just be freaking astounding compared to like what a high tier tournament has.
Right. Yeah.
So it's just like a way bigger gap than what we see in CS:GO viewership probably.
Hmm.
But how
But
did what?
CS:GO's getting up there, so it's all good.
Yeah. So man, if I can bring up the bowl cut, negative, never coming back. It's done. I hung it up to dry. It's retired. People ask, what are the thoughts on MLG coming to NA Counter Strike? Seen lots of rumors on Twitter about it. Have no idea what it actually all means, but obviously that would be helpful to the points I've made earlier about having more things to play for NACS.
Yeah, I mean, there's just not enough information out there to even make a
Yeah,
comment. I don't know
definitely.
what it could possibly be.
And the last question I had from the forums that I forgot about was basically a question like, how come pro players kind of get like recycled rather than new players getting a chance to like play for a pro team? I've seen this question before. My personal answer to it would just be that it's a comfort thing. I mean, it's a really big risk to pick up a new player that you don't know how they're going to perform. Like, especially if you're an iBuyPower or Cloud9, you're trying to compete internationally. Do you really want to gamble on a player that has like no LAN experience? That's a complete like question mark on how they're going to do. Or would you rather pick up somebody who does have some LAN experience that has proved themselves in international competition and gives you a chance to make like an easier adjustment or easier transition phase in your roster change when you have someone that already has lots of experience. So it's not that new players don't ever get a chance. In fact, we've seen Shroud, we've seen Desi, we've seen now Nitro. I mean, some players do in fact get that opportunity. But it's just harder because you'd rather go with your comfort zone, which is someone with experience.
Yeah,
Moses?
yeah, and it's just players trying to break in. Like, what people don't realize is that um, it's hard to get. It's not necessarily hard to get individually skilled enough to be as talented as like an invite player when it comes to just like aiming. I mean, there's some other smaller like details and mechanics that you need to know, but um, the biggest thing that dictates or differentiates invite teams from each other is, teamwork and knowing how to play situationals and communication, and to get there, like you just have to like be in a team that can get to the top. You don't have to like be the best, but you have to be able to like get into invite as a player. And that's hard, and it's not easy because it's not like you could be the most motivated and everything, and if you can't find 4 other people to be um, motivated enough and talented enough to get there, then you're going to be in trouble. But I mean, you have to be able to get there before an invite team is going to give you a shot. And sometimes it takes like meeting them at an event and like doing well at an event and surprising someone, even if you don't win a match individually, playing very well against good players, and you're going to get noticed. I promise you. But it's just hard. It
There you
is.
go. Yeah, I mean, I think most hit on the head. I think you have seen some players actually do get shots. Like Shroud was huge. Tarek, someone mentioned him in chat as well. I mean, yeah, so it does happen. It's just a lot harder because you want to go at your comfort zone sometimes, which is experienced players that you know of already, rather than someone who's never been to a LAN before and you don't know how they're going to react to that environment. But anyway, this show has drug on for a very long time, but I think it was pretty cool conversation, pretty cool insights. Hopefully, you folks will enjoy it. The VOD will be up if you missed some of this episode, probably tomorrow at some point on the YouTubes. So if you want to catch that VOD, and I'm sure you'll see it spread around on like Reddit or social media or what have you. So just be on the lookout for the VODs that get dropped at some point tomorrow. Other than that, Moses, I appreciate you coming in to do this with me. Like I said, we'll do one more episode together for sure after Face It and after ESWC to review those and talk about ESC Land DreamHack Winter. And then after that, I'm not really sure what future episodes of the Hype will look like. We'll just have to see. Maybe I'll interview somebody from DreamHack Winter or something like that after it happens. Who knows? We'll just have to see how things go. But other than that, I appreciate all of you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. I can tell you that I'm going to turn the stream off now to go eat, but I'm going to come back in like an hour and stream Legend of Korra, the new game that came out, because I'm a nerd. This is straight up anime nerd. So if you guys want to watch me play the new Legend of Korra video game, you can come back in like an hour and watch that. But other than that, Moses, any final thoughts before we sign off?
No, I'm all good. Thanks a bunch.
All right, man. Well, appreciate you coming by. And folks out there on the stream, I think there's some ESCA matches being casted tonight as well on the ESCA channel, like around 9 or 10 p.m. Eastern time, so you can check that out. You can check me out streaming the Korra game here in like an hour after I eat dinner. And yeah, that's about it. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we hope to see you again soon. Peace.